Have you ever just wished there was a better way to build business software? You know, a way that doesn't involve months and months of coding, that endless back and forths, only to get something that, well, isn't quite what you wanted? Today, we're going to look at a totally different approach, one that treats software development less like writing code and more like assembling a blueprint. So, let's just start with the question that I'm pretty sure everyone has asked at some point. Why is this so hard? It's a huge source of frustration for so many businesses. You know exactly what you need, you know how your team works, but getting that knowledge into a working piece of software, it just feels impossibly slow and complicated. So what's really going on here? Well, it turns out this isn't a new problem at all. For decades, we've been wrestling with what you could call the old software problem. And it's really a fundamental disconnect right at the heart of how we create these tools we use every single day. And this right here, this pinpoints the exact failure point. It's called the interpretation gap. Just look at the two sides. Over here, you've got the business experts. They know the process inside and out. And over there, you have the programmers who write the code. But in the middle, there's this translation step. It's like a game of telephone, right? The original message gets passed along, and by the time it gets to the end, the final software is kind of garbled. It leads to these clunky, inflexible tools that just never seem to work the way you need them to. So how in the world do you fix a problem like that? Well, the answer, it turns out, is based on a radically simple, almost obvious idea that completely changes the game. Here it is. This is the core insight. If you really boil it down, the fundamental logic of business, things like approvals, running calculations, entering data, creating reports, that stuff doesn't really change much. Most of our work is just a sequence of the same few generic tasks over and over again. And that insight leads to this concept, generic task objects. Now, the most important thing to get here is that these are not lines of code. Think of them as pre-made, standardized building blocks. Each block is designed to do one common thing, like show a form or run a report. And here's the kicker. They're stored as data that you can configure, not as rigid, hard-coded instructions. Let's make this real. Here are some of your digital building blocks. You've got a form block for any kind of data entry, a report block to create a document, a calculation block for your business rules. They're basically digital Legos. Instead of making every single piece from scratch when you want to build something new, you just grab the standard pieces you need from a kit. Think about a simple expense approval. You'd grab a form, then a calculation to check the amount, and maybe another process to actually pay it. Simple. So, if those are our building blocks, how do they actually come together? Well, this is where it gets really cool. With this method, you stop coding applications, you start assembling them. This is the huge mental shift. The whole process becomes one of visual configuration. It's just like an architect drawing up a blueprint. You're laying out the structure and defining the flow of work, not, writing thousands of lines of code to build the walls and windows from raw materials. And you can see just how straightforward this is. You open up a visual designer. First, you literally drag and drop your building blocks onto a canvas. For that expense report, you'd start by dropping a form task. Then, second, you just draw lines between them to connect the dots and show the workflow path. So a line goes from the form to a calculation task. And finally, you set simple rules on those connecting lines, like if the expense is approved, go down the yes path to the payment task. If not, go down the no path. It's that visual. And here's the real magic. That blueprint you just drew, that diagram, that is the application. There's no translation step. There's no interpretation gap because nothing needs to be interpreted. What you see is exactly what the system runs. The logic is captured visually, directly by the person who actually understands the business process. Okay, so how does a visual drawing become a live, working application without a single line of code ever getting compiled? Let's quickly peek behind the curtain. The whole thing is incredibly direct. The business analyst, not a programmer, designs the flow. They click a button that says, activate. In that instant, a piece of software called a process engine reads your blueprint, which is really just data in a database. Then the engine executes those instructions for users in real time. Notice what's missing here? There's no compiling, no code generation, no long deployment cycles. It's just live, instantly. So this isn't just some new fancy technology. It's a fundamental shift in who actually has the power to create and innovate inside a company. And that right there is the ultimate takeaway. This entire approach puts the power to build solutions directly into the hands of the people who are closest to the problem, the business experts themselves.
It completely removes the IT bottleneck and lets you make changes and improvements on the fly.
As the author Tom Kalopoulos puts it, this is all about connecting us to the way we really work. It's about getting our technology to match our natural human processes, instead of the other way around, where we're always trying to force our work to fit into the rigid boxes of our software. So this all leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. If the actual experts, the people who live and breathe the business every day, can assemble their own tools instantly without writing code, what does that change? Because it's not just about building software faster, it's about changing the actual speed of business itself.